Welcome, everyone. We're back. Breakpoint Show. It's February 4th, 2025. And I'm here with Khalid and Martin. I know it's been
Hey everyone.
more than 2 weeks, so we apologize. Martin and Khalid have new jobs, so they actually have to try to impress people and start out these new jobs.
New jobs and the usual excuse for this group, I think.
I know,
which is
I know. And you guys were, Martin was jet setting to conferences or whatever, and Khalid was walking his dogs. So
yeah. The best option for me, honestly.
Yeah. That's the only place that we want you. We want you in your basement or walking the dogs. So any place else, and you're a danger to yourself and others.
Yep, exactly.
So,
that's what it's about.
Yep. So we talked about the last episode, legacy software, and how you should treat legacy software, and maybe some ideas on moving that legacy software up to modern. I always call it modern legacy, because the second after you write code, it's legacy. So so now we're going to talk about like what you should do before you start writing code and as you start writing code for a new project. So we're going to call this like the Greenfield episode. I myself have a whole different take on that paradigm of Greenfield, Brownfield, because most people think of it as building a house on a greenfield. I think about it as plants. And to me, starting out is a brownfield, because you have a brownfield and that you put your seeds into, and then you grow your crops. And to me, software is more like growing plants and growing that, because it's slower and it takes time and takes discipline and takes patience and stuff like that. But most software developers don't have discipline and patience nowadays, so they just use AI to write everything.
Dude, that was your get off my lawn moment.
Get off! I'm shouting at the clouds. So.
Is your lawn brown or green? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm shouting at the clouds right now. But so what do you guys think if someone came to you in your job and said, "Hey, we have this business requirement or this business idea, and we have all, let's just say we don't even have requirements, we just have this business need, and where do you guys start?" I mean, you're looking at a mountain. They dropped a mountain in front of you. How do we scale the mountain?
Yeah, it's funny you say mountain, because I feel like I typically have a Bob Ross approach to kind of trying to tackle problems, where try to find out kind of the big ticket items, your mountains, your trees, your
fluffy clouds,
your little house over there that you're going to need at some point. But you kind of pick out all these kind of landmarks that are going to be critical to your application. And then those landmarks, you start kind of breaking down into, achievable goals or tasks. But for me, the thing, once I have kind of those elements in a project, I don't actually like creating a new solution that's going to kind of house all my stuff. One of the things I really like to do is to try to prototype any of those big elements in kind of their own isolated little projects. Because it's a lot less pressure. You feel like, okay, I'm going to end up throwing this stuff away anyways, but it's a learning experience. I'm going to learn about any particular tech that I'm adopting here, or I'm going to learn potentially a few approaches in terms of how to solve this problem. And then you are also isolating each problem. So the big mistake I see a lot of people doing is like, add all their dependencies, all their problems into one solution right from the get-go, and then they create this ball of mud because they're in the
All the
brown.
confusion, which is
Yeah.
one of my favorite songs from the 80s. So yeah.
So yeah, the people end up creating it and they don't understand where their problems are coming from because it's an interaction problem. These two things are interacting in a way that was unexpected, and now you're going to have to tease those things away anyways.
Yeah.
So I
Sure.
think prototyping, small prototypes, and just trying to build a mind map of like how you might approach the bigger problems. So
Cool.
that's my approach. But
Okay.
yeah, Martin, what are your
Martin, what
thoughts?
do you think?
I really like that approach, and actually would almost second that entire workflow. I think prototyping definitely matters. There's another aspect to prototyping as well, and that is that typically it also helps you define or figure out what your dependency should be. Like if you have an issue with, say, your software is going to have to import something from a CSV file, which library do you use? Do you write it yourself or not? Is the library that you're about to use, is that something that you can depend on? What are their dependencies? Like really figure out what is the entire thing that I'm bringing into my projects before just bringing it in and start building. Because down the road, if your software is going to live for 3 years, that's going to be fine probably. But if you expect your software to be around for the next 10 years or the next 20 years even, probably you want to limit your dependencies a little bit, or make sure that you're actually picking the more stable ones and not just the things that might go away.
Exactly.
Even if for the smaller ones, the smaller ones that are just typical helper functions and everything like that, you probably don't really care because they're easily replaced in case needed. But for the bigger dependencies that you are taking on, you probably want to do some experimentation there and figure out, is this the way forwards?
Yeah. So I'm going to throw a curveball. So before I even do anything with tech, I try to understand the business problem, because how many times have you had someone that says, "Hey, we need this problem solved," and you're like I have no idea like what the context is. So, and this is more me putting on my consultant hat, because I did consulting for so many years, where we would go in and I always call it day in the life. So I would go in and talk to people that were going to use the software and do two things: understand what a typical day in the life of their job was or is, and also pick up the vocabulary. Like, how many like times do you get in and you start hearing these like words that you have no idea about? They might be acronyms, they might be code words. It's like that dictionary of that team or company that you're building the software for, and you have to unlock their language so that you can distill the business requirements. That then I totally 100% agree with both of your stances on. Then you start building out and planning out the software. So I just wanted to take it a step.
So Chris, I want to throw you a curveball on that one, because I've been there and I'm still there, and I'm going over the entire spectrum between fleshing out dependencies or fleshing out the requirements and figuring out what the business is after or not. But in your consulting days, how many of your customers that you've had were sure about what they wanted to build at the time they contacted you?
Yeah, they didn't really understand. So I wasn't trying to understand what they actually needed. I was just trying to understand what they were doing then. So then I could actually kind of understand, have kind of a baseline understanding of their business, because I mean, every business is different. Like I'll take an example. I did work for a company down in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they did promotions. So their big partner was Procter and Gamble, and they did Procter and Gamble do all these promotions, like buy 3 things of laundry softener and get a Huggy Bear, the bear that they have, like get a plush bear in the mail or coupons or whatever. But this company they actually executed the promotions. And I didn't understand anything about like that. So I actually had to like talk to them, sit with people that were doing everything in Excel spreadsheets and everything, and understand like the execute, like the workflow of what they were trying to do. And then I would come back and have my ideas and pitch UX and UI design and stuff like that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I do have a mini rant listening to you talk though, because I think it's a good idea to learn the vocabulary of the business, but I've seen a lot of times developers go into those situations and then essentially like pollute the well by teaching the business tech lingo. So by the end of that conversation, the business folks are speaking in tech lingo, and that always drives me nuts because I'm like, they don't need to say those technical terms. There's something has happened.
That's where you have to be a listener and not a speaker. And so I always was a observer. So I think of like Star Trek, like don't influence the society that you're looking upon. What's the prime directive?
Yeah,
now I'm really aging myself. So I always look at the prime directive. Don't poison the well that you're dealing with. So I totally agree that you can't go in and start like spouting off ideas. You just have to look, observe, take notes, go back. If you have questions, ask specific questions about the business, and then come back to them and turn their business words into technology concepts.
Yeah, I agree with you. Another mini rant. I think you're talking about old Trek. New Trek seems to be let's blow up every single planet we possibly can now.
Yeah, I'm not really into the new Paramount Star Trek series and stuff like that.
All right. We'll get back. We'll get back to
yes. We'll get back to that. So I always ask people like, how do you decide on what to use? I mean, there's so many things out there. Let's take web development. There's so many different places to start. I mean, we have server side versus front end spas. We have component based software versus whatever. I mean, there's just so many different things that you have to kind of check boxes or kind of decide on. How do you guys decide? Is it just personal preference and then, or what?
I think it's a mix of a number of things. So first of all, you want to pick something that is going to be future proof, where you can find people to build that thing and so on. If you have an existing team that you're working with, you also want to check, okay, what do they know? Like if you have a full WinForms team, probably coming in with a over architected React application is going to be a really, really difficult learning curve. So you want to take that into account and essentially pick like the thing that is the best combination between, okay, this is a technology that allows us to get the project we want to build done, but also this is a technology that allows the team to iterate on this project.
Yeah. I'm starting to learn Martin has a crystal ball because he said the word future-proof at least 3 times during this episode. So maybe we should stop and figure out how Martin is getting his ideas from the future. How do you know, Martin?
It's called a time machine, Khalid. It's called a time machine.
Oh my gosh. No, but I think that's a good point though, Martin. It's like to what Chris was saying earlier, talking to the business, I think part of that conversation is risk assessment. I remember someone in our community, in the .NET community, said that it's unethical to experiment and use a technology that you don't understand to try to solve a particular problem. Maybe that's a little extreme, but I get the spirit of what they said, which is basically like the business is counting on you to deliver a solution, and based on the risk assessment that you are doing as a professional, you probably shouldn't go crazy and try to like put every new technology in there that maybe you don't fully understand the implications of.
Yeah.
So
or learn something during the project. A project shouldn't be a learning experience.
Yeah.
I mean,
it should be a learning,
kind of
learning, but not start from scratch learning to do something.
I think you still want to learn on a project, yeah.
Unless you have unlimited budget and unlimited time for your project.
I mean, I guess that's what happens to all those big consulting companies that come in and are paid by big government organizations. they just never get their projects out the door because they just never do the proper risk assessment or understand what they're actually building. So but yeah, like risk assessment is an important part in terms of picking the technologies that you're doing. I don't have a crystal ball like Martin and a time machine. So for me, the metric that I use to evaluate risk is typically like, how long has this technology been around? How large is the community? Because ultimately, like, I'm a single human being, unlike the many clones of Martin that are out there. So I have to rely on a community of other individuals. If I pick a technology that only has 3 other individuals on the planet that know it, then I've essentially increased my risk profile for picking that technology. So that's part of my risk assessment as well. The age of the technology, the vibrancy of that technology, I think all of those things go into my risk assessment. So
future proofing, risk assessment, community. I'm hearing
we're almost sounding like professionals here. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it's scary, man. It's scary. So what are the things? So I always like to ask people, you know what? We're all good at writing code, but sometimes in a project, that's the easiest thing to do. And what I mean by easiest is we're all good at coding and software development. What are those things that you have to make sure that you have scaffold? Let's take the building metaphor. You know, there's all this support mechanism that goes into building something like a skyscraper. You have to build that infrastructure around your skyscraper so that your builders can get to the building. So it's all that scaffolding and stuff. Like you take a picture, you see the old pictures of like buildings in New York City being built, and like there was almost a building built around, scaffold around the building that was going to end, that they were going to end with.
Yeah, I think for me, what's interesting is like when you work on an existing product, I think it's really easy to take for granted the existing infrastructure and feedback loops that are inherent in a business / system that's already there, right? Like there's a lot of business knowledge, like innate business knowledge in an organization. And when you're working on an existing application, it's very easy to focus in and do a single task and get that deployed. You know, when you're working on Greenfield projects, a lot of times there is none of that infrastructure that you talked about, and there is no potential process. So for me, when you start a Greenfield project, I think it's really important to understand the feedback loops that you're about to build between you, the developers, and the stakeholders, either the business or the users or whatever. So think about the feedback loop that you're going to create so that you can get information quickly, you can get information clearly, and then you can adapt your work so that you can deliver that kind of value. So that kind of infrastructure is typically like CI/CD. Ironically, one of the things that may not seem like a big deal, but I think is a big deal, is like a shared chat channel between you and stakeholders, so people can feel like you as a developer are inviting and welcoming of feedback. Like, I can't explain how many times feedback has just been lost because people don't know who to email or who to contact. So they just kind of sit there and say, well, this sucks, but nobody really wants to hear from me. And then that critical feedback never goes anywhere. So for me, that is important infrastructure.
Yeah. By the way, I also think this if you're not doing Greenfield and you're doing Brownfield and you're on an existing project and so on, there is something to keep in mind of all of this as well. So first of all, agree with the Greenfield project, setting all of that up and making sure that you have it in place. But second of all, if after 6 years you come on a project, very often the thing that a lot of developers will say is like, okay, why was this choice even made? How stupid is this? And you always have to think about, okay, this team has maybe been under time pressure. There have been 2 developers working on this instead of 6 that you might expect. So always, while you might take some things for granted, also think about what led to the decision to do something this way. But also keep in mind, if it's really something that has to be changed, you can always still change it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will push back a little bit. We have to spice this podcast up. We need some drama. I need to disagree with Martin.
Yeah, some disagreement. Yeah, we're too agreeable today.
Yeah. No. I do think it's important to understand maybe past decisions, but to also understand that past decisions and the context that they were made in are sometimes in the past. Like if you're coming into a new organization, they are hiring you to solve a particular problem, right? Understanding what that problem is and how to best solve it. I think it's important to have conversations to slowly switch the context and the culture so that you can provide the best value. So it's like, yes, people made decisions in the past, but doesn't mean that those decisions are in any way like set in stone or holy or beyond reproach. So I think it's always, for me, it's always important to look at where you're trying to go as a team and to treat any and all decisions as something that you can revise and that you can improve. But here's my caveat, is make sure that your users are also on board with that change.
Yeah.
Exactly. Don't be a chaos monkey.
And you guys bring up expectations in the beginning. So like if you're going to have 2-week sprints, and every 2 weeks you're going to be able to show something to the stakeholders, then meet that, because so many times we set expectations and I'm guilty of it. So when you point a finger, you're pointing 3 fingers back at yourself, I always say. So I do this, but I point out to people, if you're gonna do something, do it. And if you're gonna do 2-week sprints and show demo worthy software every 2 weeks as coming out of it, then make sure that every 2 weeks, hell or high water, you do it. Because so many times we all get busy, we get behind, and we don't meet expectations. And so I always do that, which also comes back to, how do you support, like what software do you get to support your team? Like We all use GitHub or something like GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab or something else. Like everyone has a way to track work. So you have Jira or what Azure used to be.
Yeah, no, let's not.
Let's not recommend that.
But I'm just saying, I'm talking about the things that people use.
We're trying to set people up for success here, Chris.
Yeah. But there's stuff like that you have to go in and either bring that existing skill level to do, like, hey, we're going to do Scrum or Agile or whatever philosophy of software development that you want to do, and then bring something that can track it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in the old days, we used to just have sticky notes and on a board and just kind of, hey, I'm working on this, write it on a sticky note, and I'm going to put it up and then start moving it across the board when we were all in one big room. But remember that software, I mean, I go back to my original premise. Writing the software is probably the easiest thing that you're going to do. It's all the other stuff around it that is difficult because of and I still think most developers are lazy and they don't write documentation. So when someone comes in, they don't write onboarding stuff. So when a new developer comes in, there's nothing other than tribal speak to getting them up to speed on a project. So it takes discipline and patience and good habits to write good software. And trust me, most software failures don't happen because people are not writing good code. It's because they're not following good process and structure and meeting expectations that they promised in the beginning.
Yeah. I'm looking at our subscriber count and it's plummeting into the ground.
No, I was just going to say, because of this generalization and people being upset by that, it's going through the roof.
Yeah. I mean, but
hey, listener, you are so lazy and your documentation writing skills are terrible. That's what we want you to get.
By the way, give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up.
The two people, including my mom. Well, my mom.
Hey, Chris's mom, write better documentation. That's what that's our message to you. Chris, I will, another spicy take for me. I always believe like a good team can make a bad process work, but a process can't essentially save a bad team, right? And for me, I think a lot of developers, whether they're writing code or whether they're managing a project, they over rely on a process and think that if they just follow process step 1, 2, and 3, it will inevitably lead to success. We see this a lot in the pattern space in programming. Like, oh, I used all these crazy patterns and my page takes 10 seconds to load. What's going on? It's like, well, no, you can use patterns, but you need to still use your brain. But for me, the important part of setting in a process is taking a step back, understanding who's going to be involved in the process from the beginning. And to go back to my point, it's like your stakeholders need to be involved in the process. They need to understand the process and they need to have bought into the process. And then the most important part of adopting any process is continually evaluating whether that process is actually working for your organization.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So for me, it's like, oh, we adopted Scrum. Well, we aren't actually doing Scrum, and our stakeholders aren't involved, and our point system is all over the place. This isn't working for this particular group of individuals. Maybe we should go back and reevaluate what will actually work for this group of individuals.
Yep.
So yeah, that's my mini rant.
Yeah.
Please disagree with me.
I agree.
Come on, man.
Well, so do you?
There's no disagreement in this group.
But here's the thing. I mean, but if you switch too much,
yeah, then
that causes disruption and slows down your project because you're always kind of changing things up. So
but then the question is, does it become slower than when you would keep using that bad process?
Yeah.
What does the Navy say? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So if you need to understand how fast can your team actually move, right? And I understand as developers, there's always a sense of urgency and pressure coming from multiple sources, whether it's stakeholders, whether it's managers, whether it's, I don't know, internal sense of dread, existential dread, telling you maybe you're not as good of a developer as you think you are. You know, all those pressures can kind of add up to making you do a rush job.
Yeah.
So
well, and that's where I was saying you have to have patience when you develop software, and you have to build that into the expectations from the stakeholders. Now, patience doesn't mean that you take 2 years to get a project done that should take 6 months. Patience is you don't freak out, you don't cause yourself undue stress.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at a problem, or I mean, it's kind of like, you know what, I always say, if I'm going to run into a problem, I would much rather, and it's cheaper to acknowledge that problem as soon as possible than to let it drag out and cause severe harm to a team or a project or to a company.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you know, it's funny. We really haven't been talking about software, like developing software, really.
I mean, we started there a little bit.
And then I derailed us off, but really, I mean, it comes down to developing the software isn't that hard. Like when Martin writes a new page for his
speaker travel
speaker conference software. I mean,
you don't want to know.
I mean, probably didn't take very long, but understanding.
No. Wait for this. Wait for this. I have to first of all create a new entity in my DB context, then make sure that I have all the mappings available so that I can push them into a database layer. Then have a repository pattern on top of that is flexible enough to support any future use case, again, future proof. Then have another mapping on top of it so that I have a business layer to work with this, and then throw it over an API so that I have JSON. And
then you develop your layer of all the DTOs that will work with your business layer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, no, just kidding.
Yeah.
I think this ties back into what we've been discussing. Like, don't overcomplicate things that you're building, and then go with something that actually lets you move fast.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a good point. By the way, the side tangent, I just imagine there's a mirror off screen where Martin is, and when he needs to have like a stakeholder meeting, he just goes up to it and he points at the guy in the mirror.
You
says, "Come on, man, we gotta get this project done. You gotta get on board." And when he needs to yell at a developer, he just yells into the mirror. No, to Martin's point, I think this is a good tactic for greenfield projects, which is like get to a working. I mean, maybe this is from like the Web 2.0 era, but get to a working solution as quickly as possible, right? So I think I'm going to use Martin's trademark here. If your attempt to future-proof and to build hyperscale applications starts before you've actually solved the problem, you're probably setting up your Greenfield project to fail. You might not fail, but it's definitely slowing you down. It's definitely likely at a minimum irking your stakeholders, right? Because they're like, what the heck are you doing? And this is where lingo starts to bleed into the business side. It's like, well, we're creating a repository pattern with this distributed cat, and your stakeholders are their eyes have already glossed over.
I just wanted a button.
Yeah,
I just wanted a list with some buttons. Yeah.
No, you don't understand. When we scale to 7 billion users, this is gonna work.
And they go, well, there's only 7,000 people in the company max. So
Jeff is the only guy that is going to press this button. You don't know how
Jack
many
and
Jeffs
Jill
there are.
Are the only two people that are going to use this. So yeah.
So
that is, by the way, another one that I've seen in the past, like to circle back to over architecting and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, who is going to use this application? If it's 5 users, your architecture and how you build things is going to probably look completely different to when 9,000 people in the organization are going to use it.
Yeah, that's why a family lives in a house made of wood and takes a couple months to build. But a skyscraper that holds an entire company and has to exist for a long time and has thousands of people in it may take a year or two to build. So, but yeah. So, hey, we have to wrap things up because Khalid has a phone call he has to be on. We all have real jobs. So I like to be transparent with people. And I have to get back to a job. Martin has to keep looking in the mirror and doing all that. No, I'm joking. Martin probably is going to get lunch, or maybe already had.
I'm just going to see if Khalid shows up in the call. That's my job.
Yeah. So Martin might be on that same phone call, but yeah. So any quick closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to kind of do an overview is like, when you're picking a greenfield, do a lot of mini prototypes, work out your feedback loop, nurture and care for the relationships with your users, right? Because ultimately you're trying to make them happy, and a successful project buys you goodwill so that you can take risks in the future. If you want to try that new technology or try something, your users are more willing to, give you a little
trust,
leeway and trust, right? Because you're delivering value. Again, get those feedback loops in place. Make sure everyone feels like they're part of the team, whether they're developers or not, and that should set up your greenfield projects for success.
Martin,
I will say, back to the beginning of this episode, it's all about time travel in the future and the past. But yeah, prototype, because it's not only going to learn you all of the things you need to know about the problem you're solving and so on. It's also going to give you insights into whether you need this API layer or this wild architecture and microservices and everything, or whether you can just do something simple that allows you to iterate much faster.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. So I'm not going to say anything more. You guys nailed it.
We need a spicier podcast, okay?
You guys were like Ted Lasso and hitting the bullseye barbecue sauce. You guys nailed it. So,
okay. Speaking of nailed it, before we go, if you've listened this far, please like and subscribe.
Yes.
Helps us with the all-knowing algorithm. So
yes.
Yeah.
So thank you for anyone who lasted this long. We will be back in a week or two, hopefully, depending on schedules. But if you have any ideas, feedback, we are going to get some guests on. If you have any ideas for guests or want to come on, if you have a good enough idea or a good enough concept, let us know. Reach out to us. But like us, tell people about your friend. Follow us on social media, all that jazz. So, but want to just say thanks to Martin and Khalid. You guys have been really awesome co-hosts, and
don't undercut yourself, Chris. Don't undercut yourself. You've been
I don't. So, but yes. So thanks everyone, and see you very soon.
Thanks everybody. Bye. Jazz hands.
Bye.